Oh, hi there. We're here in the Focal Podcast. Excited that you're here. Thanks for listening. This is the intro song. Let's just get to the episode.
What is up, Focal friends? This is Sierra
and Kirsty,
and welcome back to What the Focal, the only photography podcast run by non-photographers where we interview industry experts to learn their stories and learn from their experiences.
This week we're joined by Lindsay Coulter.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Not
Really
too
good.
Bad. Tired. It's pretty early.
Yeah.
I know the time change is not so fun for you guys, is it? Hi, Lachlan.
Hey. All right, I just wanted to say hi. Have fun.
Okay, awesome. So, how's your day been today?
My day's been great, actually. I feel like I'm kind of in a flow right now. It's really hard to get into like a flow state as a photographer because we do so many different things. So like running out to go and do a shoot and then like doing this errand and doing that errand and then coming back and trying to like get into a flow with like computer work can be really challenging for me. But I stayed up until like 1:00 this morning editing and getting galleries together. And I woke up this morning like fired up, ready to continue. And it's such a good feeling. So actually my day's been pretty good, all things considered. Just a lot of deliveries right now. The machine of like shoot, edit. It's crazy to try to like keep up with the momentum of it, but it's been good.
Yeah. Is photography the only thing that you do, or do you do other things for work as well?
Yeah, so photography is my full-time job. I've been doing it for 10 years. And it's actually always been pretty much full-time since the start. I was lucky in a lot of ways that I started out as a photographer while I was still in university. So I started while I was in my third year at the University of Waterloo in geography and environmental management. So very different from photography. Actually very similar in some ways. Like geography is really just like the study of humans and places and how we interact with them and why we do things, where we do them, and you know, the human side of geography at least. And that's what I focused on in my studies. So it's honestly, photography is very similar in that sense, that I just kind of now capture humans in their places and try to match up the image of their landscape and who they are. But I digress. I was a student, I guess in like 2012. I was in my third year when I met my now husband, Taylor Jackson. I think you guys might know him. And basically when we first started dating, it was like, well, if you want to hang out with me, you're going to have to get a camera and start coming to weddings. So I was his second photographer for the first kind of summer that we dated. I picked it up pretty quickly and jumped into a bunch of weddings with him. And by like March of the next year, I had launched my business like full on. So kind of one season of working with Taylor and doing, you know, learning from him. And then by the next spring, I built my first website while I was working as a server. I literally launched my first website while I was in a restaurant working as a server. My bosses are probably gonna like, they've probably heard that story, I'm sure, a million times, but I was sitting at a booth trying to get the servers to open the restaurant. And I was like, just give me 2 seconds. I'm just going to launch this WordPress website real quick. But when the wheels start moving, it really starts moving.
You had side hustles for your side hustles.
Literally. Yeah. Like I feel like, so I was in school for another year or so after that. So photography was a full-time job for me, but it was also a full-time job on top of my other full-time commitment of being a student. And also I was working at a restaurant, which I think is a really common theme for photographers. I feel like a lot of us started out in sort of like that server industry because it's really flexible. And also like the money is really good for the amount of time that you have to put into it, which is also kind of like photography. But yeah, I kind of just did all of those things at the same time until the photography business I was growing grew too big for me to do the rest of them. I graduated university. My parents they worked at the University of Waterloo, so I wasn't getting away with doing that. But I finished my degree online because I couldn't go to in-person classes anymore, just like with work and travel commitments and stuff. But that's a super long-winded answer to, yeah, I'm a full-time photographer.
No, that's really interesting. Did you always want to do wedding photography when you started out, or did you experiment with like any other kinds of photography?
I definitely experimented. I mean, the nice thing about starting with a really well-established wedding photographer is that you kind of get into weddings much earlier than you would if you were to just start out on your own. You know, clients really like to see a proof of concept. They like to see that you can do it. And I had built a really solid portfolio pretty quickly because of Taylor, which was amazing. But with that said, like Taylor really specialized in weddings. And for my first couple of years, I kind of just mimicked Taylor's business. You know, I saw that it worked and I just kind of did what he did, but my own version of it. And then over the years, I really started to develop more of the family and commercial sides of my business on top of doing weddings. Which is not a thing that Taylor really focuses on. He's not really great with kids. He does family photos for like past wedding clients and stuff, but it's not his specialty. But it was really nice over the years to see what I really enjoyed doing. Like I was a camp counselor, so like kids are actually easy for me. I feel like working with families and kids is a thing that I love to do. The first blog post I ever made on my website was photos of my little cousins at Easter, because I didn't really have anything that I could share. Like the weddings I was shooting for Taylor were not my own clients, you know? So the very first thing that I ever shared was like a happy Easter. I'm here and I'm going to start doing this, you know, like putting yourself out there. I think a lot of photographers have this mindset that they don't want to build a website or start doing social media or start selling until they have a portfolio. And I'm like, well, how do you think you're going to get it? Literally, how's that going to happen? So you start with what you have. And what I had was really, really cute little cousins.
I have a question, and that's, did you still work at the restaurant for a while after you graduated university and you were balancing like the restaurant and for your photography business, or like when you graduated, were you like fully full-time photography at that point?
I was still working at the restaurant. I worked there for so long that they were really, really good to me. And they were like, can kind of make your own hours. They needed me at the same time as I needed them, which was really a good position to be in.
Yeah.
So I stopped serving quite as much. And then I started working kind of as like a supervisor, and I would just go in to open the restaurant in the mornings to give their managers a little bit of a break, so they're not like closing the restaurant and opening it, which was really good for me, especially coming out of university when I did have a little bit more of a schedule that I stuck to, even though I was doing online learning. Like I would still wake up at a reasonable time in the morning and have a good structure of my routine in the day. And I think a lot of graduates realize that when they graduate, they really lose a lot of routine unless they're immediately jumping into a job, which also has routine. So keeping the restaurant was awesome for me because I would be there first thing in the morning to open things up, obviously before the restaurant opens, get things going. And then I was gone by noon. So I still had my full day to myself to like go and run this full-time business. It was such a nice buffer. I think a lot of the fears that photographers have around going full time is like, what do I do if the money stops coming in? How am I going to continue to have cash flow? And my suggestion is just like, you work your butt off at whatever you can, getting money wherever you can, until the money is so good that it's impossible for you to keep those other things going, right? Like that's my recommendation, at least. Like I was also really adamant that I didn't want to ever go into debt starting my business. Like I had always stayed out of debt. And I think it's a thing we don't talk about enough as business owners, like how crippling debt can be. And if you're coming out of school with student debt and then you immediately pack on credit card debt or a student, like a line of credit or something, because you're buying gear that you can't afford, that's not being paid for immediately by weddings or sessions. That's a really hard place to be in when you're trying to be creative. Like debt and creativity do not go well together.
Yeah.
Like any kind of big looming stress just doesn't work well with creativity. So I was pretty adamant that I was going to just work so that I didn't have to ever like take out loans or anything like that to start my business. Photography is like a pretty, as far as starting companies go, a pretty low cost, like low startup cost. Like the gear itself is no joke. Obviously that's expensive, but you can buy used, you can rent. There are so many options that aren't like, you know, putting $20,000 on a credit card and then hoping for the best. So yeah, I worked. I was also teaching yoga, and I was a piano teacher.
Wow.
And I feel like
Oh.
all of those things happening at the same time helped me build this business. Like I was thinking the other day about where I am now versus then, you know, like before the pandemic, I was shooting about 50 to 60 weddings a year. Now I shoot about 35 by choice. I kind of narrowed things down when the family and commercial sides of my business started growing. I wanted to be able to make sure that I focused on each side of things well. But you don't just like wake up one day and all of a sudden have 60 weddings on your calendar. You know what I mean? That happens really slowly. The first wedding that I got, I was like, do you think that they're going to realize that like I shouldn't be doing this? Like, do you know what I mean? Like that imposter syndrome of like, I'm just barely out of university. I am a server. I'm a piano teacher. In my mind, I wasn't a photographer yet. Like I hadn't identified myself as a wedding photographer yet. And it's such an important mindset shift to start identifying yourself as a photographer. Even if you're not there yet, but just to start like actually like mentally identifying yourself as that, because it shapes all of your decisions, right? So when I started identifying as a photographer, more money in photography started coming in. And then the opportunities that I had going on in other areas, like working in a restaurant and all those things, they started naturally falling away. It wasn't like one day I woke up and I was like, you know what I'm going to do today? Just quit my job. Like I actually held on to all of them for as long as I could until I had built a business that was big enough that I couldn't do that. I know that's not like an easy thing for a lot of people. Some of them have literally 9 to 5s and they have to make a decision one or the other, you know? But I think if you can do it in a way that's a little bit more gradual and a little bit less of a slam in your face, it's probably going to be more sustainable. Like most slow changes are the sustainable ones, right? Unless you just like have an insane amount of savings, in which case sick for you. Love that. Generational wealth. Do you have that? Quit your job.
So is there a moment for you that like it just like clicked and you felt like, okay, I'm a photographer now. Like I earned my title.
Oh, that's a really good question. I can't say that there's a moment. It was so gradual for me. There have been so many like pinch me moments along the way, and I still have them. And I think reminding ourselves of those consistently, like literally every week, I'm like, how great is this? Like literally just this past weekend, I was out doing a family shoot, and it was at a beautiful location that I used to go as a kid with my brother and like hike. And I said to my clients, how cool is it? Like I could just get to like hang out with you guys in the place that I used to come for fun as a kid. Like most people would dream of that being their job, right? That their job on a, you know, Saturday or Sunday, they just get to like go hang out with some people, take some beautiful photos in the place that they would choose to have done that as a playful activity as a kid. Like that's a dream come true. And somebody's paying me like pretty well for it. This is like, I still have those pinch me moments like 10 years in of like, man, I could be like sitting behind a desk at a job with no freedom and no autonomy and no creativity, but I get to do this. Those moments I think are so important to like get you through the muck of it.
Yeah.
I can't say that there was like any one moment. I think every time somebody hires me for like a dream wedding venue, or when I was getting hired for like destination weddings, I would say weddings where I was traveling, that somebody hired me to travel. Those were always like, are you sure me? I had a client bring me to their wedding in Australia. And to me that like is still so wild. It was such an amazing experience, but I'm like, do they not know there's photographers in Australia? But I would say like I don't know if there's a defining moment, but that one really stands out for me as like, man, what a cool career. Like what a thing we've built here, that somebody's like, hey, you were awesome. I actually second shot their wedding with Taylor in Niagara on the Lake, in Ontario. They had one here. And then I kind of jokingly said, okay, so we'll do this again in Australia when you guys do your Australian wedding ceremony and reception. And I guess they took the joke seriously. So Taylor wasn't available. I didn't just steal his clients from him. Taylor wasn't available. They were like, so Lindsay coming? So that was a pretty exceptional moment, I would say.
Oh, for sure. Can't imagine.
But yeah, honestly, the identity thing is still so common. Like, I don't think that it ever really, like, I very firmly consider myself a photographer, and I still laugh like at the concept that people that know me would think that I would have another full-time job, because I'm like, how do you think there could possibly be anything else going on here? But I think there's I tried to not judge that question, because I think most people don't realize that photography is like a very well-paying career, and also very, very time consuming. So when it is your full-time main focus and you start identifying yourself as a photographer, the work starts coming in. Like I was saying, that flow state, once you're in that flow state, the universe starts having your back. I don't want to get like so spooky, but I feel like as soon as you start putting it out there, it will start coming back to you. It's just how consistently you're putting it out there, right? You can't say I'm a photographer once and like apologetically online. You have to say it 3,000 times over and over again every single day. Yeah, really own it.
Yeah. When you were starting out as a photographer, is there anything that you think you would have done differently, or like any mistakes you made that you would change now?
I think that learning from Taylor was so like, beneficial, and people would probably give their left arm to be able to have Taylor Jackson be the person that mentors them in their early days of their business. I think that if I were to do it again, I mean, hard to say, because how do you ever know? That it's like, changing history. I don't know that I would be here if I had changed things earlier on. I was also 22 when I started my business. So think of the chaos of 22 years old. You're trying to figure out who you are as a human being. You know what I mean? Yeah. You're like, okay, I'm like being trusted with people's very real, like very important moments in their lives, while I'm also kind of like a teenage dirtbag. Do you know what I mean? Like 22 years old, I'm like, I should not be trusted with this at all. And I'm like trying to figure out, like, is this who I am? Who am I without this career? I wish I had paid attention. I think I wish that I had not paid attention to other photographers earlier on, that I would have put my head down and thought, how do I want to do this versus how do other people do it? I got there pretty quickly, I would say. Within about 2 years, I was like, I've built a business that makes sense for Taylor, basically. And not just Taylor, but the other photographers that I knew. Like one of my very close friends, Nova, is a wedding photographer in our area. And I started shooting like her. I started paying too much attention to other photographers online and comparing my work and what I was doing to what they were doing. But the problem with comparing your stuff to other people's work is, first of all, you could stand in the exact same position with the same camera and the same lens and have a completely different outcome. So comparing your work when you are not them is like really ineffective. But the other thing is I was comparing my starting line with Taylor's 10 years in and with
Right.
Nova's 7 years in or whatever, right? Like they're also 5-6 years older than me and they're not teenage dirtbags right now. So I am so grateful that I had such strong mentors and people that were in the business to be like, grow up and take this seriously. And I did. I took it so seriously from the get-go. I feel like a little bit like I lost kind of my youth in my like early 20s because I went so aggressively into building a business so young. But doing it young is kind of what gave me the freedom to, I didn't have a mortgage. I didn't have car payments. You know what I mean? Like I didn't have kids that were, needing to be fed. I didn't have huge expenses really. So doing it young is kind of the best time to do it as far as financial stressors go, because I really didn't have a lot. But you're just so impressionable at that age, right? You're so easily swayed in every direction. So I would say as fast as you can, just tune out the noise, pay attention to what you have to, and like answer the questions that you have by looking at other photographers' work and asking them questions. You know, if it's something specific, like how do I build a website? I had to ask Taylor that because I literally had never built a website. And Taylor is an amazing educator in the sense that now he has really grown into the like more like specifics of how to teach people things. When he was teaching me, he was not an educator in the photography space like over 10 years ago. He was a mentor to a lot of people, but when I asked him things, he was like, I don't know, just figure it out yourself, which is so aggressive from a boyfriend. But but as a mentor, he gave me just enough information for me to figure it out for myself, because he knew that he wanted me to build my own business. He didn't want me to build a carbon copy worse version of his. Right. And I think it's so important for new photographers to realize that there are a billion ways to run a photography business. And the only one that's going to be sustainable is the one that you build for yourself, not the one that's based on what other people do. So whether it's building the website or your posting strategy on social media or, you know, how you're going to build your portfolio, all of those things surely can be copied from other people, but that kind of takes like the joy and the fun out of it, to be honest. So I think just, yeah, putting your head down and doing it for yourself and like muting other photographers on social media is really critical.
Right. So you'd say like, would you say that you found like more joy from it when you found your own style?
100%. And I think that like the term like find your own style is something that really stresses photographers out, man. Oh my gosh. Is it a thing you guys must hear at Focal all the time? People being, I'm really trying to find my style.
Yeah.
And I think it's a myth, if I'm being honest with you. And I'll tell you why I think it's a myth. I think that style is evolutionary. It's based on who you are at that point in time. It's based on who your clients are. It's based on the landscape you're shooting in. It's based on the venue you're shooting in. So although some photographers might want to pigeonhole themselves into the light and airy, the dark and moody, I'm just like going to shoot your wedding in a way that feels representative of the other work I've done. Like I'm not going to go rogue and all of a sudden start doing something insane that doesn't look like anything else I've ever shot. But I'm going to shoot it in a way that makes sense for that client, that session, that area, that location, like all of those things. In the sense that like, I'm not going to walk into a candlelit after dark ceremony and shoot it like it's a June afternoon on a vineyard, right? Like that would be wild. And if I was to say I'm a light and airy photographer walking into a very dark and moody situation, how is your client ever going to see what that might look like? But if you're just yourself and you're not trying to pigeonhole your style into anything, I think it can be more evolutionary instead of so static. And I think that that's the problem that a lot of photographers like. I think it makes sense to try to nail down your aesthetic and your general brand image from just a branding and a marketing perspective. Like, of course, pick brand colors, pick fonts that represent you, pick, you know, a general aesthetic and a general vibe and a mood. But like saying I do light and airy or dark and moody is only only portrait and wedding photographers would do that. Look at a commercial photographer, they would literally never. A fashion photographer, they would never. They'd be like, I'm going to shoot for the thing that I'm shooting.
Right.
So yeah, I think finding my style as far as the business would make sense. Like the thing that made me the happiest, the earliest, was when I found like basically who I was, not necessarily my photography style, but like my style of the experience I wanted to give my clients and the kind of work that I wanted to do.
I love that.
Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective. It's very different from what like we hear on the day-to-day basis. So that was very interesting to hear.
I know. I wish I am sure somebody that hears that is going to be fired up. They're going to be like, how will clients know your style? And I'm like, to be honest, nobody's ever had a hard time really. I used to, in the earlier days when I was trying to sort out my general aesthetic and my look and my vibe, I got way more questions from clients saying, what is your style? And to me, that's like, imagine like flipping through, like, imagine like going into a store and being like, what's the general style here? The girl working in the store is going to be like, can't you tell? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm confused. You're looking at all of the product and asking me what the style of these clothes are. That's kind of how I feel about somebody looking at my portfolio and being like, so what's your style? I've obviously done a really poor job of curating a look and a vibe and everything based on what I've done and who I am and what I offer, if you have to ask that question. So for me, the like, what's your style question really comes down to what kind of image about who you are and what kind of a photographer you are you putting out there? Like Nicole Ashley, she's another focal photographer. Her website does such an amazing job of showing you exactly what her style is and who she is right off the bat, because her style is so representative of who she is as a human, right?
Yeah.
It's representative of the locations that she shoots, the style of weddings that she shoots, her clients, all of those things, right? Her editing style, all of that. It's representative of her and who she is in this moment. Is that to say 10 to 15 years down the road that that's not going to change? For sure, probably will evolve. But I guarantee people don't email her asking her what her style is.
Yeah,
because
true.
It's in your face. It's right there.
Yeah.
So I think any photographers that are still sort of finding that, I would encourage them more to like find out who you are. Like what like sets you, what sets your soul on fire? What excites you? Is it like, it's not necessarily photography related. Do you love going for walks outside? Or are you more of a city person? Well, that should be representative in the work that you do. Like I surround myself with plants all the time. My work is very green. It's very like lush and I like to bring a lot of nature into my work. And I think that that's sort of more of what clients now are looking for, is like, what's your aesthetic more so than anything. And if you haven't shot this style of aesthetic for my wedding, do I believe that you could do it? Do I believe that you have the skill set to make that happen?
Definitely. What do you think has been the most like fulfilling part of everything you do?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm like so grateful for the business that I've built. So I feel like there's a lot of things, but I think that probably the most fulfilling thing is getting to wake up every single day and choose for myself what I'm going to do. I think having the freedom to build something for yourself, especially as a young woman, is so important. Whether that's if you have a job and you have an employer that gives you autonomy and allows you to feel like you get to make choices every day, that you feel like you're building something for yourself and really contributing, or you're doing it for yourself and like literally from the ground up. Lindsay Coulter photography, down to the name that I chose, down to the website, the color, the social media, the clients, the venue, the portfolio, all of those things literally did not exist until I kind of spoke them into existence. And that's like really crazy to me, that like I built every single part of it. And although I say for myself, obviously it was with assistance, and I think everybody should recognize when they need help and what to find help with, like a website, truthfully, is probably one of the biggest things that I would recommend people probably jump on pretty early, instead of doing what I did, which was like build like a WordPress janky, like people's first impression of me is just like the messiest thing of all time. That was, a pretty big realization. But I think, getting to wake up every single day, creating something for yourself, and being able to impact people's lives around you, being able to employ other people, being able to give work to other photographers in the area. Like, I feel like the reach is, when you get to a certain level in your career, your reach is just, it goes beyond yourself, right? Now you get to start helping other people build their businesses, which is pretty amazing.
Is there anything that like you would have done if you weren't a photographer? Like, what was your plan before?
Like another job?
Yeah.
What was my plan? Yeah. So my plan seems very half-baked now. Well, it was like actually so wildly specific, but really poorly thought out. So I was in university in my undergrad for environmental management, and my vision before meeting Taylor changed drastically after I'm meeting Taylor and realizing, like, so you can just like build your own business and do your own thing and have your own freedom. That was a little bit of a surprise for me. So before that, I kind of thought you had to have a job. And I knew that the only way to have like a really thriving career and environment was probably if I got my master's. So my plan was to get my master's in like natural hazard management, basically studying natural hazards, natural disasters, and helping, like, I was really excited about the idea of helping like communities that are constantly heavily impacted by natural disasters, and traveling to those areas and kind of helping them realize like the natural disasters are probably going to be much more frequent over the coming years, and like helping them build more sustainable communities that aren't going to be so impacted by like tsunamis and things like that. So that was my like big picture dream. Part of it honestly was I really like to help people, but the other part was I really wanted to travel and see the world. So I get to do those things just in a very, very different way now.
It's like the same thing, but very different.
Yeah. I still get to travel. And I feel like in some ways my work helps people. I don't think it's in quite the same way as like going into, countries and helping people. But I was very, very intrigued by that idea. I do think that photography has the ability to help tell those kinds of stories. Like Taylor traveled to Antarctica and was able to make a documentary about rising sea levels and polar ice caps melting and all those kinds of things. And realistically, the stories, when you're talking about, this is like getting so off topic, and I'm so sorry for the sake of the podcast, but when you're talking about natural disasters and climate change and really any kind of like social justice issues, social issues, the stories that we're told and the things that make the most change are typically from media, right? Like from photo and video. Like if you look at, An Inconvenient Truth, that was probably the thing that got so many people going to university for climate change related degrees, because Al Gore put out this like phenomenal documentary about climate change. And we only start making personal changes when you see things like that. So although that's not the work that I currently do, I think that there is an opportunity there for photographers that are interested in travel and landscape to start telling those kinds of stories about, like, we're not just influencers traveling on private jets and just destroying the environment. I think it's important that if we are doing those things, we're also telling the stories of the other side, the impact that is being had. What a wild turn of events. You probably were not expecting that answer to come out of this podcast at all.
That's like 100.
Let's talk photography and climate change.
No, but that's like 100% like what I learned when I was in business school, is like the saying, like, a picture's worth 1,000 words is so true. And like we're always told to include so many visuals because like visuals are just so powerful. So there's such an like,
and I think photographers forget that. I think that they're so used to doing these like cheap mini sessions and cheapening their work and forgetting the value that what they have. And maybe the value is not going to be on such a global, impactful scale as a documentary like An Inconvenient Truth. Like it's very possible that that's not going to be the impact that you're going to have. But I think that the sorry guys, my Slack is popping off here. I hope you can't hear Lachlan. I could have put this on Do Not Disturb here. But I do think that photographers need to recognize the impact that they have on individuals' lives. No one recognizes the value of a photo of a person until that person's no longer with us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you wouldn't believe the number of times people on their wedding day say, oh, I'm tired of taking photos. I don't want to do any more family photos. And they're ready to scrap photos of people that I'm like, not to get so dark on your wedding day, but trust me when I tell you want that photo, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
And I think it's really important that photographers recognize the value in their work and charge for it appropriately, but also really see the impact that it has, see the impact that it can have on their greater community. If they want to do something to help their community, use your work to help your community, you know, or just be really okay with helping individual families document life stages, which is super, super valuable.
Yeah, there's so much value in that.
Yeah. And I think that it's a thing that we really easily forget because you are just, you know, I'm just one girl with a camera. However, like I like to think that my work has had some impact on other people's lives.
100%. Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's an important message for all photographers to have is like to value their work.
It's hard to value your work sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It is. And I think it's easy for us to, as photographers and business owners, it's so on one hand really important for us to be always looking at our businesses and our work with a critical lens. You know, it's the only way you're going to improve is if you're constantly saying, but what could I have done better? Mm-hmm. It's a really hard place to be in mentally when you're always thinking about what you could have done better without also thinking, but what did you also do there? You know, what were the good things you did there? So sure, could I have shot that in a different way? Could I have given them a better client experience? Could I have done something to improve? Yes. And I'll do it on the next one. But when we do that, and when we are critical of ourselves, it's also so important for our mindset to say, but what were some of the good things also? Like, what were the benefits? Like, what great client experience did you offer? What great images did you give them? And were those images better than the last batch from 6 months ago? And if they are, like, we have to count our wins as well as being critical. We can't just be so critical all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's awesome.
I know a lot of female photographers suffer from perfectionism, you know. I tell Taylor all the time, like, he has so much audacity. That man he just is like, I'm just going to do that, which I think is so inspiring and so incredible. And like, we could get into the very many ways that men and women are raised differently as boys and girls to believe that they can just do whatever they want. And that's just no problem. You want to start a business? Like, yeah, why wouldn't I start a business? You know, I'm hoping that things are changing for young women and they do believe like you absolutely can do all of those things. But in the meantime, we have decades of the same narrative of, you know, trying to be perfect and trying to make sure that if you do it so perfectly. And sometimes it just has to be out there. And especially when you're starting out, it really just has to be out there. It just has to be done. You know, it really comes back to like, I think that the first big problem that photographers have to solve is their website and social media presence, right? It's the first big thing that photographers have to solve for themselves as far as problems go. Because no one knows who you are until you tell them who you are, right? And a website and your social media are the two biggest components of that. And they really go so hand in hand. And it's the first barrier for people that they're like, oh, I just don't know how to do that. And I'm like, it doesn't have to be perfect right off the bat. You know, like I really struggled with that. I really struggled with, does my website need to be perfect? But once you get an imperfect site up there and you feel the momentum, then you realize, oh, I can improve on this site now that I have a bigger portfolio, now that I have more of a social media presence. Like, you start imperfect. You don't start when it's perfect, because if it was perfect, you wouldn't need it, probably, right? Like, you wouldn't need to be building it. It would be built.
Right.
The idea of imperfection or of perfection is it's impossible, because you'll always be creating a new thing that needs to be done. Like, to this day, I'm still thinking about how we can improve on my website and how I can improve on my social media. That's not a thing that stops, and it shouldn't. If you're building a business, it should never stop. So I think it's just what's good enough to get this point across that I need to get across to people, to get my face out there, to get my product out there, my services, and have people hit the book me button, right? Like, it's just, what's the least amount of effort you can put in to get that problem solved, right? And I think that a lot of new photographers really get hung up on, well, I don't want to launch it because I don't have this ready yet. I don't want to launch it because I don't have this ready yet. And I'm like, well, first of all, if you can get it ready, then go and get it ready. But if it's not a thing that you can get ready, like literally this week, it doesn't need to be done. It just straight up doesn't need to be done. Think of your business like a man with the audacity to do literally whatever. Like, that there's some, for a fact that there's some guy with a photography website out there with one picture, his name, and a book me. Guaranteed.
100%.
I guarantee it. I absolutely guarantee it, that somebody has had the audacity to launch a business with one image and I'm here. It gets the point across. It's not awesome, but it gets the point across. So I just think if that's the minimum product that somebody's willing to put out there, your minimum is so much better than that. You've got one family shoe of your little cousins, put it out there. You've got a portfolio. You know? Don't wait until you have portfolio images in Maui. Like that, I mean, you could do that. Wink, wink, you could do that. Not a conference 2.0 in Maui.
Yes, Lindsay, plug us.
You could obviously do that. But if somebody is sitting there thinking, I really should get a website together, but you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to wait until April 30th, May 1st, in order to build my dream portfolio. Why are you waiting? Don't build the dream portfolio then. Your website's going to be, you're going to want to rebuild your entire website by the time that day rolls around. You're going to have a whole new portfolio. You build it now. You build it now with the version of it that you have. And with the assistance of Focal's so great. You guys will tell people here's what we think that you should put together. This website makes the most sense for you based on what you have. So if you are a 1 year starting out photographer or 10 years starting out 10 years in photographer, here's the website that makes sense for where you are at. And I think it's just important. I'm going so full ham on Focal now, which is not what I know I wasn't told to do that, but I think it's just so important that we solve one problem at a time. Stop looking at it like a huge picture, because if you look at a photography business like a huge picture, you will never do it. It's insane. If I were to know what was involved 10 years ago to get to where I am, I would have never done it, because that is an insane amount of work. That is way too much to bite off. That's just nuts. But it wasn't. The first thing that I had to do was come up with a name, take a few nice pictures, figure out how to do that, make my camera work. It's just not rocket science when you break it down into some small manageable pieces.
One step in front of the other.
Literally one step. Yeah. You do one step at a time. What's the thing you can do right now? So you can't do that yet. Okay, no problem. That makes sense that you can't do that yet. You're 1 year in, you're not even a year in, that makes sense. But what could you do right now?
Right.
Stop that. That's when I go back to the comparison game of no, you shouldn't compare yourself to Taylor or I. We've been at this for a decade. That's insane, right? First of all, don't compare yourself to anybody, but it's always nice to have aspirations. It's always nice to have people's businesses that you aspire to be like one day, to have the freedom of their businesses, to have the income of their businesses, all those things, very aspirational. I have people like that in my daily life that I'm like, yes, that is phenomenal. And I love that for you. How do I go about it in my own way to get to a similar position like that? And that's all you have to do is one step at a time. What can I do today to get a little bit closer to that? A A.1, A.2, A.3, you know, like A and B might be huge steps away from each other, but like break it down into like literally what's a thing I can solve today? If you have one email in your inbox from somebody looking for a session and you're like, well, and I'd say this because I have experience with hearing from other photographers that are like, yeah, I had an inquiry and I haven't responded to it yet because I don't have a pricing guide. I'm like, why do you think you need a pricing guide?
Yeah.
I have a pricing guide. I'm 10 years in. You don't need a full pricing guide. You don't need a magazine. You don't need a document. You don't even need a PDF. You don't need any of that. What you need is to respond to that freaking email in your inbox of somebody saying, hey, I want to work with you. That's a live body. That's somebody who wants to give you money. Literally, you reply. Yeah, you reply with one sentence. Sounds amazing. Here's my rate. Here's the location I think you should choose. Do you want to book in? Yes or no? You know what I mean? Like you solve one problem at a time. Don't sit on the one thing that is like a photography business only exists with money. Let's be honest. A photography business exists for income and also to create a career and all those things, but like income. So you solve the problem of I'm not making money by making some money. That will give you the time and the money to then go and pay for a website, to pay for, like, you have to generate income. And I think that we get so hung up on the details of, well, I don't have a pricing guide. I'm like, could you make one? Canva, have you heard of her? You know, like if it's not a thing that you can solve right away, then don't. Literally find the closest step to getting to the next one. And I think it's just so important that we remind ourselves that we have everything inside of us to do that. It's no one else's job to help us get to the next step. It's only ours. And as soon as you realize that, it'll just happen. You know, as soon as you realize no one else will build the website. Well, that's not true. Sorry. That's not true at all. Someone else will build the website, but you have to hire them. But like, no one else is going to build your business for you. You know, no one else, like Focal's not going to come knocking on your door and being like, hey, so we noticed you don't have a great website or you don't have a website. Like that's just not going to happen. You guys will solve a lot of problems for them, but they have to do it and they have to want it bad enough to be like, yes, let's solve this problem.
Yeah. Can't be afraid to fail. Yeah.
I've just been ranting here for like an hour, you guys. Are you sick of me yet?
No, this has been so good. I guess that leads like into the last question pretty perfectly. So if you were to give one piece of advice to yourself starting out, the one thing, what would you tell yourself in the beginning?
I think that the piece of advice that I would give myself is just like literally one step at a time. Like really, like it just comes down to that. Like, okay, I just watched the last episode of Keeping Up with the whatever the new Kardashian show is last night.
I was just
have you seen it?
Yes, I was just thinking
I
of
literally,
this statement.
I am afraid that people are going to roast me like they roasted Kim Kardashian. However, the part when they ask her, what's your advice for young women in business? And she says, get your ass up and work.
Yeah,
that's literally my advice. And although I preface that with the hugest thing, the caveat that Kim K missed out on saying in her soundbite that got like her roasted, is I recognize that we don't all have the same starting point. You know, I started out debt free because my parents worked at the University of Waterloo. I started out with a boyfriend who is a thriving photographer. That is not lost on me, that privilege that I had and those benefits that I had. However, at one point I was just starting out just the same way as everybody else. And I would have never, ever believed 10 years ago that I could have the business that I have today, that I could have the income that I have today, that I could have the freedom, that I could travel, that I could have a home that I love. And I would have never pictured this life because I didn't know it was possible. So I think that when you start like envisioning like an almost embarrassingly large dream for yourself, and then you just start literally getting your ass up every single day and just doing something to work towards it. Every single day, believe that you can do it, and every single day go and do the thing. I think that that's lost on a lot of people. And I'm not here to say like people are lazy. I don't think that that's true at all. I think that they're working at the wrong things.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you heard of the idea of motion versus action? I think that's what it's called. James, I feel like I think it's James Clear. Oh my gosh. Have you guys listened to Atomic Habits or read Atomic Habits?
Oh, it's on my list.
Take it off your list and go and listen to it right now. Right after
Okay, I will.
this.
That'll be my next step after this.
That's you and I are talking. I'm gonna give you homework. We're gonna talk about it. Atomic Habits. Atomic Habits is literally life changing for and I only listened to that audiobook, I don't know, a year and a half ago or something like that. So it's not like, I used those tools this whole time. I heard those and I'm like, I have already been doing a lot of these things, but I didn't even realize it. And I can't tell you how beneficial the tools are in that book. But one of the things that I'm pretty sure it's James Clear talks about is the difference between making lists and making plans and just doing them. Right? Like we can talk all day about the things that a photographer needs in order to get started, or the photographer can just literally get up in the morning, make a list of 5 things that they reasonably could get done in a day and start checking them off one by one. And then if you don't get to the last 2, you don't beat yourself up. You put them on tomorrow's to-do list and you start with a new 5, right? Like you every single day think of manageable things that you can achieve, and every single day start working towards them. And it's just incredible how much time you have in the day when you use it effectively. When we stop making plans to make plans to make plans and you just start doing the things, you wouldn't believe how much faster things can happen for yourself when you just, stop talking about, I'm sure that you guys hear it on the focal side of things of photographers being like, yeah, so first I want to get this done, and then I want to get this done, and then I'm going to focus on a website. And it's like, we should just probably focus on the website while you do those things, to be honest with you. Like we should just do the first thing. Like that's the biggest thing. Let's do that right now. You can do those things. Don't put them on like a to-do list for the next 6 months, because it's probably just never going to happen. It's a today thing or it's a never thing in my mind, generally speaking. I cannot recommend that book enough. Like Atomic Habits, so good. I listened to it. I really like the audiobook of it. I'm sure that the written book is also very good, but I like to listen to audiobooks while I edit because it just like makes time go a little bit faster for me.
I bet.
I'm gonna contact you. I'm gonna message you and be like, I would like to hear your feedback on this. Thank you.
Keeping us accountable.
Love it. I'm going to email Lachlan and be like, I can't believe this isn't like required reading for your entire team. Like, go buy these girls some books, Lachlan.
Tell them.
I'm gonna tell them. Amazing.
I think that was an amazing piece of tips, like to end us off with, for everyone to just keep in mind, where like we all might have different starting positions, but it's all about just like putting one foot in front of the other and like starting somewhere. I think that's not even just applicable for photographers. That's like applicable for anyone starting anything.
Yeah. It all feels so scary when you look at the mountain, right? But if you just take little bite-sized pieces, it's manageable.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much for hopping on this call with us, Lindsay. We really appreciate you coming on. This was such an amazing conversation. Yes, it was amazing.
Learned a lot.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. This was so fun. I hope everybody really, I hope I didn't lose anybody on my climate change rant there in the middle.
I appreciated it.
I liked that. It added a little bit of spice.
People, they're gonna be listening to this like, wait, how did that happen? You have a built-in, I think you have a built-in like teaser for the show. Like somehow we get talking about climate change and this woman's just absolutely unhinged, ready to rock.
Okay, Lindsay, if our listeners want to find you and they are not following you yet, what can they find you on and what are your handles?
So Instagram is where I'm the most active. I post on there every day. I am at Coulter Photo, LCOULTER photo. if you want to check out my website, it's lindsaycoulterphoto.com. It's really beautiful, if I do say so myself. And yeah, those two places are pretty good. I also do have like a Facebook group for photographers. So if you're interested in, joining a little community of other photographers, if you go to my Instagram, there's like a link tree with a bunch of links, and you can find that Facebook group there under photography education. So I'm pretty I'm pretty erratic in there as well, just jumping in whenever I feel like it with random motivational moments. But actually, I'm not sure when this podcast is coming out, but Lachlan is going to be doing a live in my group next week. So if it'll be recorded, and Lachlan and I are going to be talking about Focal and the importance of having a really great website in my Facebook group. So awesome. They can jump over there and see your boss with me.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks so much, Lindsay.
Awesome. Thank you guys. I really appreciate you having me.
Of course. Chat later then.
Yeah. Talk to you later. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
And if you guys are interested in just learning a little bit about Focal, hearing about our websites, we left a little link for you to book a meeting with our friend Ben. And if you're interested in getting any business advice, we did also leave a link to our business accelerator course that's for free. So yeah, if you guys are interested in that, it's just right in the description for you guys to find.